Hello, and welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today on the show, I've got Senior Manager of Experience Design Operations at Best Buy, Mr. Fred Beecher. Fred and I have worked together in the past, and I asked him to come on the show to talk specifically about design operations and also to talk about education and also prototyping and iterative design. Fred and I go way back. I hope you enjoy this conversation because he's a great guy, and it was a lot of fun chatting with him. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Fred Beecher. So Fred, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Why don't you tell me and our audience a little bit about your background and what you're doing these days?
Sure. Well, currently I am leading experience design operations at Best Buy. And that's fairly new for me because for the rest of my 20-year career, I've pretty much been an agency UX designer. My most recent gig was where I was working with you, leading a team of 45 designers across multiple offices. Some of the things that I have been really involved in the past are creating a user experience design apprenticeship program. Because one of the things I'm extremely passionate about is helping get people into the UX field in order so that the UX field can really flourish. Because you can't say that you have a growing field unless you have a consistent supply of talent. Other things that I have also been known for are prototyping, specifically my work with the tool Acture. I used to train people in Acture, flew all over the place training people. That was an interesting experience doing that. But I've been in the game for a while, and it's been something that's been really close to my heart. It's my hobby as well as my profession, because ultimately every day I go to work, I get to make the internet a better place for people.
Yeah,
so
that's great because you and I have a very similar passion around education. We think it's I think it's very valuable. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I do this podcast, to help people kind of see how other people work, how they got to where they're at, and then when they're there, what are they doing with it? And how are they successful, right? A couple of topics that I wanted us to talk about today. One is obviously that education piece. That's something I do want to have a conversation about. And then I want to talk about design operations just in general, and how you see the future of user experience design teams, integration with other developers, and all those sorts of things. So let's start with the education piece first, just because I find that fascinating. So there's a lot of changes in user experience education over just the last 5 years. It's crazy. And I say this on almost every episode where I have people from the UX space. The titles change every 5 years, too. I mean, we've got customer experience design and service design and all these different things. Well, I get there's different aspects to those things. It's still falls under the UX sort of umbrella from my perspective. So these days I see people got master programs in user experience design, and we've got these boot camp sort of places like Prime Academy. If you were talking to somebody, Fred, who's interested in getting involved in the user experience as a craft. Maybe they're a designer, a graphic designer, maybe they're a developer, maybe they're a product owner or something, and they want to move into that, right? What would be I'm guessing you wouldn't tell them to go sign up to get a master's degree in UX. What would you guide them towards?
Well, I am a UX designer, so I wouldn't actually answer their question.
That's right. Yes.
I would begin by asking them questions about, what their current situation is, what their background is, what their goal is. For example, one of our family friends is a graphic designer.
Okay.
She is really not feeling the profession anymore. She sees what's going on out there in the UX world, and we've been talking about what sorts of opportunities are out there for someone like her. And we talked a little bit about what user interface design was versus user experience design. And it turns out that what she's more interested in is the user interface side than the user experience side. So I'm not going to say, oh, you need to, go away from your family for 2 years, move down to Pittsburgh and get a master's degree from Carnegie Mellon. It's not that's not really advice that's going to help anyone.
Yeah.
So my approach is always understanding their needs and their goals and things like that. I had another gentleman who I talked with recently who was debating whether or not to go to a local boot camp school. And he told me about some of his background, about his personal situation in life, because that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
Like my friend who wants to become a UI designer, she can't just move. I mean, she's got 3 little kids,
right, and a mortgage.
Yeah, and a mortgage. Yeah, so you can't really do that. But that's one of the things I was asking about, and it seemed like his situation was something where, he really could take some time off and focus on this. And he had been talking to other people, and so he was pretty convinced that UX was what was for him. And so I said, honestly, I think that going out for this boot camp school, that's probably going to be your best, easiest, fastest option into the field right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that you personally have been a champion of apprentice programs alongside these boot camp style things. If your experience with the apprenticeship type program for bringing people in, do you feel like with the world that we have today with these boot camps and online learning and all these things it's still could be as relevant for an organization, or do you feel like maybe that's changed?
That's a really good question. I feel like apprenticeship is still valid, and this will get into our design operations question in a little bit.
Okay.
But it depends on the kind of business that you're working for. So when I did the apprenticeship program, it was at an agency, and at an agency, time is literally money. So maybe that's not the best place for an apprenticeship program. Now, if you are at a larger organization that's maybe has, I would consider a product-driven organization, so, and my definition of product is fairly broad,
as is mine.
So, if you have a situation like that, what you have is a need for tactical design work. And when you have a world where people can really educate themselves pretty effectively on UX methods through boot camp schools, through online classes, things like that, you have a lot of people who are at the level of what I call skill acquisition. So they know lots of things, but they haven't really done many things yet. They haven't applied those skills. So they kind of know what to do, but it's like riding a bike. You need to hold on the handlebars. You need to pedal the pedals. But like there's other stuff like not falling down. But how do you do that?
Right.
How do you tell someone how not to fall down?
Right.
So it's that aspect of the skill that these people they're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
The next level is what I would consider to be skill development. That's when a person, they've acquired the skill, they have used the skill, and they're reasonably competent with that skill and can use it the way that it's intended to be used. And then after development comes what I call mastery. So at the point where you've used this skill a lot over and over and over in many different situations, at that point you have the ability to think about how to use this skill in different situations, how to break apart its components and do some of the stuff that I'm doing now at work, which is to do half of it at one time, half of it sort of overlapping, and basically using the skill in a way that no one would ever tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
'Cause it's not how to do it, but it still gets the job done, and you can do it. that way because you've done it 100 times
right.
before.
And you can be flexible dependent on the situation and
Yeah.
in confidence, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so when we look at the value of user experience design, the value that industry sees in it is strategic. It's how do I get to understand my customers? How do I get to understand how to move my business forward by meeting my customers' needs? So these are very sort of top level kinds of ways that a user experience designer can be valuable, and that's where the value truly lies. The value does not lie in making wireframes, but wireframes need to get made.
Yep.
Or let me revise that and say prototypes, because come on, it's 2018.
Right.
I have opinions.
And that is why you are here, sir. I think that's an important aspect to be cognizant of, is that having confidence in the craft, in your ability to produce or your ability to understand and design is really important. But just like I say about myself, I didn't get to the position I'm in by hitting it out of the park every time.
Yeah.
Failure is a great teacher.
Oh, yes.
Right. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is that the more you get this experience, it isn't just because you're just constantly piling on the accolades, right?
Correct.
It's you're bumping into things and you're getting that experience. What happens when I throw a ball at this thing? Does it bounce back and hit me in the face, or does it,
Yeah. And I think this goes to the utilization of resources as well, because if you have a senior designer who is spending time on the details of your prototype, and that's how they spend most of their time, I'm not sure you're getting the value out of that person that person can potentially provide. But if you have a series of, I don't know, let's say 3 to 5 people who are newer to the field, like maybe they came out of a boot camp school or were self-taught in some way, doing a lot of that tactical day-to-day work where they're focused on the craft, and you have that senior overseeing that work, then you have 5 people working at the same time instead of just one. So you're getting more done, and you're building your team at the same time, because you're taking these junior designers and gradually turning them into senior designers.
Right.
And your senior designer, you're gradually turning into a manager or a principal or a director or whatever, because they are learning how to make other people successful, which is what I consider to be the goal of leadership.
Yeah, and so, but that's not a set it and forget it sort of plan. Like,
No.
You got to be deliberate about how you're setting those expectations with those junior designers and that senior designer, right?
Yep.
Because again, you would hope just through osmosis, a lot happens, but unless you are setting a course for saying this is where I would like to see things in the next year or whichever, with Bill, Sally, and whoever, to the senior designer, so they understand what your goals are, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is, again, where the business model of the organization you are with really has a big impact. What I just described is really difficult with agencies.
Yeah.
But what I just described is something that I think could work really well at companies like Best Buy, where I'm currently at, because they have a lot of work that needs to be done, and some of it is very, very tactical. But if you can offload the tactical stuff to people who are really engaged by and interested in the tactical stuff, then you unleash your senior people who are really interested in the strategic stuff, and they can start providing all sorts of value that you weren't getting out of them before, and they get really into it and really enjoy it. So it's a retention play as well, which in this age of a continued design talent drought, even though there is a ton of design education options out there that weren't there before, people are still getting poached all over the place. So whatever you can do to make your own team a really engaging place for all levels of practice, that's going to be a huge defensive move against what's going on in the industry.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm going to come back to that and ask you about how to keep that team engaged, maybe some ideas for people. But
sure.
let's